My guest right now before me is a lady named Katie who works for and with and something to do, which we'll get into, Acts 435. Hello, Katie.
Hi there. Nice to see you, Andy.
Let's just jump straight into Acts 435. My first thought is that a scripture reference? I'm not sure there's that many verses in Acts. But anyway, what's just really briefly, what's Acts 435 all about?
Yeah, absolutely. So you're exactly right. It's
Yeah.
based on Acts in the Bible, chapter 4, verse 35. And we see the early church giving to each as they had need. So they accumulated their resources that they had, and then they distributed it as people had need of certain things.
Which is a really beautiful thing. I've seen that in various contexts at various times. Somebody has something and pay it forward, for example, which is perhaps a hashtag almost that sort of belittles, I think, some of the significance of that to some extent. But that is that thing. I've got something. Let me share this with you.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's exactly what our donors are then able to do through our website.
Fab. So very briefly, for someone who's not heard of your particular organisation, what is Acts 435 all about?
Yeah, so we connect donors, as I just said, with those that have specific needs. And we do that through a network of local churches and local charities who are seeing the needs in their community. And they are then able, those partner churches and charities are able to post the request for help onto our website, which our donors can then go on and meet.
Fab. That sounds. See, I don't like to know too much before I get to an interview. Otherwise, I don't ask the questions because I already know the answer, and I think, well, I won't know that, so I won't ask. That's really cool. So, what kind of things get posted that people are in need of?
Yeah, so it's all about essential items, and that might not just be practical essential items. It might be essential items to somebody's well-being as well. But so just some examples, really, we do see a lot of posts for white goods and furniture, for school uniform, for clothing, workwear, but also things like travel to hospital appointments. I was just reading a story about a mum that needs to be able to travel with her child to and from hospital, and on her limited income, she can't afford to do that. Or the list is endless really in terms of well-being as well. We've done requests for fishing equipment for somebody to have that mental health break, sat by a river, but also lots of other things, bikes. I could keep going, but just
Wow.
anything that is going to support somebody in their moment of need.
That is much wider than I conceived it could be. I expected things like food and clothing, but I mean, fishing rods for mental health. I can get that. A river is a beautiful place to be. They're looking at water is good for our eyesight and our brain. So yeah,
Mm-hmm.
it makes a lot of sense to me. So people find you, and then they say we have this need, and then what? Does somebody sort of do they get a notification or an email? How does someone then see? Okay, well, there's a need. How and then they can, how does how do you get the two people to meet together, kind of thing?
Yeah, so obviously the person with the need is met by the local church or charity. They will have a representative called an advocate. So the advocate is the person that posts the request onto our website.
Yeah.
And once the funds have been met and the church or charity has helped to purchase the item for the person, they send a message of thanks back to the donors, but how the donors hear about it. So we are quite a small team. We don't have a fundraising department or anything like that. Actually, a lot of our donors find out about us through word of mouth or through our partner churches. Our churches sharing with their congregations about their partnership with Acts 435. As requests are being posted, our donors can sign up to receive notifications. So they can say that they're particularly wanting to know when a request in the refugees and asylum seekers category is posted, or maybe their region, because they love donating towards the specific people in their community. So they can receive those notifications. We also obviously send out mailings as well with highlighting specific requests or types of requests as well. And then they can go on and they can donate anything from £5 to the full amount towards that request, essentially like crowdfunding.
Do you know, I've met a lot of people and I heard their stories. This is one that's leaving me a little bit speechless because in a sense, what a simple thing to think of. I have a need. The church then says, "Okay, we've got someone with a need. Who can meet that need?" And I don't know. I'm almost speechless. It's just, which is not common. It's there's a wonderful simplicity to this. I
Mm.
mean, there's a lot of moving parts of how you actually connect it, I guess, but where do you begin to think? I mean, how do you? Told you I was speechless. How do you do that? How do you create that? I mean, where does it come from?
Well, the idea in the beginning came from a fantastic businessman called Julian Richer, who owns a chain of electrical stores called Richer Sounds. And he had the idea, obviously, we started 15 years ago when the internet was still pretty new. And actually, he connected the fact that there was donors with fatigue, that they were giving to large pots, not knowing where their money was going necessarily, who wanted to give to specific need. And he saw the internet and this ready-made network of churches who were reaching out into their communities, and he connected the dots almost. I obviously wasn't around with Acts 435 15 years ago, but the way that they then set up a system, and they got an amazing web developer to create a bespoke system to be able to, it's that flow of requests coming in, being met, and then the payments all going out. But so we obviously have an amazing team who look after all the requests. So as soon as a church or a charity posts a request, we check it through within 1 to 2 working days, and then it gets posted live on our website. And generally requests are met anything up to 2 weeks, but at the moment, right now, it's 5 days from them being posted to being met by our donors, which is incredible. But yes, in terms of the actual systems and processes, we've honed it really well over the last few years, and rebuilding our website in 2022 really helped to, say exactly what we needed from our system, and actually now we've got a new system in place. We could see more and more churches and charities partner with us, and be able to all our systems would be able to cope with that.
You've answered a bunch of questions that I was going to ask, one of which is, how do you protect your donors from people just saying, yeah, I'd like a new TV, thanks very much, which, we're living in a society, we all have our own desires, and selfishness comes into that. But then you have to think, well, isn't it? So you've answered the question because it's coming through churches and charities who obviously know an individual, that they've already got that personal story. But I love this so much of how you're connecting people's individual needs, because we were talking just off air before we came on, but I've used a food bank. It's quite impersonal. The church was lovely. I didn't feel like my dignity was stolen. It was a very hard time in our life. But we were talking as well about the idea of more than just providing a week's worth of food in a crisis, which is absolutely essential. And you've got nothing, you've got kids you need to eat. But then beyond that, how do you get to that? Because otherwise, if you're not careful, you can create a dependency for somebody of just being given stuff. You want help people to be able to get on with their life themselves as much as possible. And that's what we found. We had food for a week and a bit, and we managed to get back into a system of getting some more jobs and money and all that kind of stuff. But there is that moment of crisis of, I can't cope now, I need help now, and 6 to 12 weeks time is going to be too late for me.
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously we're about fast financial help. So somebody asked me earlier, how many of your requests get met? And the honest answer is 100% of our requests get met. Some sometimes take longer than others. Some might be posted and it doesn't necessarily pull at donors' heartstrings as quickly as others will. But all of our requests get met, and it does fluctuate on how many days that takes throughout the year. Around Christmas, donors often tend to be more generous, and then over the summer months, it's a bit quieter. But on average, up to a maximum of 2 weeks, which is, as you say, it's fast financial help. But in terms of the validity of the requests, obviously our churches and charities, there is a sense of trust between us and them, that they know where the genuine need is. But also we have guidelines in place. So churches, charities sign up with us, and we provide them with a handbook and an information session, and they then have guidelines to guide them in utilising Acts 435. Obviously, we don't just say anything goes, because we want to be fair. We want to see where the need is greatest and be able to meet it there. So obviously there are guidelines, but equally our churches and charities do the most amazing job at knowing where the need is and being able to post the most appropriate requests onto our website.
How did you get involved with Active 435? I think it's a natural question from what we're talking about, because you're talking about some pretty involved stuff there, about booklets, about policies, about ways of working. That doesn't just materialize out of nothing. There has to be something of where you're creating that from. So how did you get involved with X435? I mean, how did you make all that stuff happen?
Yeah, so my actual story and work story, if you like, but actually definitely a God-led story, is I finished university and I went off to work for Christians Against Poverty. So I had quite a few friends that worked there and thought that was a no-brainer. I'll apply for a job, and I got a job in casework at CAP, and I dealt with budgets and putting budgets together and things like that. And then I moved into the comms team at CAP. But along the way, I had two wonderful boys. I've now got three. But after my second child was born, I live in York, and Bradford's quite a way away. So we made a decision as a family that I'd stop work after our second was born, and just see what God brings. And actually, after about maybe about a year, maybe less than a year, actually, Jenny, our executive director, we actually attend the same church. So she said, would you be up for an informal chat about Acts 435? So obviously I knew of Acts 435 because a couple of people in our church worked for them. And she sort of said, would you like to cover so-and-so's maternity leave? And I was like, this is brilliant. So for me, it was the most God perfect, door opening, because it meant I started on a few hours, meant I could still be at home with my two kids. I'd work during nap times. It was really flexible for me. And at that point, I'd actually started. So there was only the three of us, one of us on maternity leave. So I did do all the messages, all the requests, all the messages. I did all the inbox, our admin inbox. I did all our social media. I did a lot of different things under that role. And obviously we were a lot smaller then. So my colleague came back from maternity leave and I stayed on, which was fantastic. And we sort of split that role in half. So I went into the more comms side of things and like looking after our social media and stuff like that. So, and my role has just grown with me. But it's definitely a team effort, and other people might have experience of this, where you are a small team. So there's now still only 4 staff team because of our gift aid model, which we might come on to in a minute. But we are a small team, and actually that small team, we still often interweave each other with each other's jobs. So such as the handbook I mentioned, all the guidelines and stuff. Obviously I knew the guidelines from doing the role before, but I put together all the actual, we've got an interactive online handbook, so that is kind of part of my role. So I obviously upload all the information to there, but also because of my communications role, I also meet with people on a coffee Zoom once a month, tell them all about Acts 435 and how it works. So we all intercross in our jobs and our roles. So I'm pretty clued up on every part of the charity.
It's that thing, isn't it? In a small team, you kind of have to be able to do more than just your job. We sort of have a team of 3 and a bit more, and we just everyone has to muck in and get the job done, which is great. So Acts 435 is there. It's working with churches. It's connecting churches and charities to people who have needs through those, and then it almost feels like magic, but I'm sure it isn't. And you're then connecting them to the donors. How? I mean, where does faith sit with you? Because you're talking about Christians Against Poverty. You're talking about churches and stuff. Just give us a bit about your own journey of faith. And you explained how you're working for Acts 435, but what's your own faith story growing up into wanting to serve God in some way?
Yeah, absolutely. So I suppose my own faith journey started when I was a teenager. I had a friend at school whose dad was the local vicar, and literally the church you could see from my front garden, the local C of E church. So she invited me several times, and I used to go along to youth events and youth stuff that was happening there. And it was quite a small village, so there weren't many youth, but that was great. Fast forward a few years, I was at college, and actually I then met my now husband, and it was actually him. His family went to church, and he didn't quite want to take me to church yet. I'm not sure what he thought I would think of church, I suppose. So actually he decided that his youth leaders were really cool and that it would be okay to take me on a youth alpha. So obviously you get the adult version of alpha, but you also get there's a youth version. And so we went along to Youth Alpha every week, every Friday night. I think there was food provided, which is always a winner, isn't it? But actually, we then went on the away day. And I know for a lot of people who've got a journey of faith that encompasses Alpha, often that away day, that Holy Spirit away day, is the day that, it's aside from the head knowledge of what church is and what prayer is and who Jesus is, actually experiencing Jesus is a very different thing in the Holy Spirit. So that away day for us was massive. And actually my husband experienced the Holy Spirit for the first time on that away day as well. And we both committed our lives to Jesus on that day. And we got baptized at the same time, which was great. Fantastic. And then we got married a year later, still in our teens. So we then moved up to York. Well, sort of. My husband, we weren't yet married. He'd moved up to York to start university. We weren't married. We were engaged, but not married. And I did a gap year for YFC. I literally went from starting to follow Jesus and went, I don't really want to go to uni yet. What can I do? And I had a friend actually that worked for Youth for Christ. I think you've spoken to her already. She now works for the Evangelical Alliance, called Rachel Heffer. Yep. And she worked for YFC. So I did loads of work going and telling kids and young people about Jesus for a year. That first initial enthusiasm of, and that was great. So I did a year of that. I then moved up, we got married, and we both were in York. And actually we're now part of an amazing church in York, which does lots of different things. Just leaning on God 24/7 for work. And I suppose I've always loved a job with purpose. And the best purpose that we have is to tell other people about Jesus, and keeping Jesus at the center of what I'm doing. I suppose that's how I ended up bouncing between, with a break for a degree in the middle, but doing a year with YFC and then CAP, and then the natural progression really was not progression as such, but next step was I then worked for another charity. So I love it. It's brilliant.
I love some of your story. I can recognize parts of it. I was married at 19. Best decision I ever made in my life. When we're married for 30 years next year.
Wow, congratulations. We're not quite there. We're nearly at 19 this year. So
it's great though. We've been through all sorts of careers and moving houses and children and family and all the kind of stuff that comes with it. But it's really great to have somebody that's been there the whole time, and who still eggs me on to do crazy stuff like start a radio station, which is great. So we understand now more about your own faith story, which is great. Youth Alpha, that in itself is a testament of invite people along, because who knows, you might be the person that invites them. It's not for us to say to people you need to follow Jesus. It's for us to say, why don't you consider Jesus in your own life? We've got a story to tell. You tell that part of the story, you go to something like Alpha or whatever that might look like for you, and all of a sudden you're meeting your future husband, which is kind of cool, in and around all that stuff as well, which is great.
Yeah, absolutely.
So just coming back to Acts 4:35, I think just because my natural questions, and this is why I don't like looking at websites too much beforehand, because I ask the questions that perhaps other people might have, because I like to do that. So I've got a need. I've gone to my local church, my local charity. They posted it to you. You put it on the website. Now that need is out there. How do you find donors? Where do they come from? I heard a statistic recently about how there are so many Christians in the UK who are evangelically minded, and how few as a percentage are actually tithing. So there's a lot of money that people are currently sort of not giving as perhaps we should do as Christians. But how are you finding donors? I mean, you've mentioned word of mouth and stuff, but how does somebody say, well, great, Acts 4:35, I'm going to go and I'm going to buy a washing machine for someone? How does that bit happen?
So over the years, we've done several different things. And as I mentioned earlier, I think that we don't have, I look after communications. We don't have anyone that specifically does fundraising. And, a lot of people, like yourself, I suppose, hadn't heard of what we do until you started clicking around on the internet. We're not a household name, if you like. Maybe you'd mention CAP and somebody would know who that is, but actually Acts 4:35. But then people hear about what we do and they go, well, why doesn't everybody know about you? But we are doing what we can do to spread the word with our small team and resources that we have available. So but actually the two biggest ways that our donors hear about us, one is the local church church or charity, and often it's our churches that are talking to their congregations about the needs that are there, and a lot of our advocates based in those churches will send round, I've posted a request for somebody in our local community, click on this link and you'll see it, and that's just one of the best ways. It is the people in local communities that serving each other. And then the second one for us is social media, partly because that's one of the things we've built up, but I think there's a great value with social media. I know not always, but for us, the immediacy of people being able to click on a link and see exactly the request, or being able to access the requests and things directly from our social media, and being able to see what we're about by clicking on something, it really it is brilliant for people just finding out about us more quickly. We have tried lots of other things. We mentioned Big Church Festival earlier. We had a stand there last year, and it's really hard to know the fruit that comes from that. Actually, if we could attend all the festivals, we would. But again, it's budget and team time that we don't unfortunately have. So we would love to be everywhere, but we can't. And print as well. Print is another one. I wrote an article for the Evangelical Alliance magazine last year, but unless you can explain quite what we do in words, a printed ad just doesn't seem to reap benefits. So we keep trying different things, but definitely always, I think the main two things for us are going to be that word of mouth through local churches and charities, and also social media, because of that great link with being able to just access our website from our posts and things we're putting up there.
Cool. I said I was speechless at the start, and I think I still am a little bit, because I just think what a simple way of doing something. And I promise I meet a lot of people, a lot of organizations, and I'm constantly thinking, why doesn't everybody else know about them? I didn't. Now I do, and I want everyone to know, because honestly, this is great, because you're actually helping people's individual needs, and it's good. As we said at the start, it's good to meet someone's crisis. We've got no food, right? Here's half a dozen bags of tins and packets, and off you go. You can go and eat for a week or two. When you're in that crisis, you need that. Your shelves are empty. We've been there, and it's really hard. But beyond that, there needs to be more, and there will be specific needs to that individual, and individualized care is costly and complicated and takes a lot of time. It can get quite messy, but actually it's in the mess. That's where I always think of where Jesus was frequently, and actually in the middle of the mess, it's kind of where we need to be as Christians, isn't it? Don't you think?
Absolutely. And just showing God's love through a practical item can often open up other conversations. And for one of our advocates, they wrote us a lovely message the other day that had opened up just the opportunity to pray for that person. And actually they were really open to prayer, which is just fantastic. But yeah, absolutely, Jesus would be at the center of it all. And it's that going that extra mile for somebody, and actually while you're chatting at a food bank and their cooker doesn't work, so they can't actually cook the food you're giving them, they can hopefully then say, well, let's post a request onto the Acts 435 website and hopefully get that sorted for you as well, which is it's just going that extra mile for people that they're meeting.
So you mentioned the charities and churches that people are then sending on requests to you. How many churches and charities have you actually got involved who are feeding in requests?
Currently around 700,
wow, okay.
which is incredible, but we still need more. And completely celebrate the 700. They're doing an amazing job, and it is a real eclectic mix of different churches, different denominations, different charities and organizations doing various different things and working with different sections of the community as well, all doing their own amazing work. But yes, we're really open to so many more churches and charities signing up with us. And I think the big thing we haven't yet said, Andy, is that we're completely free resource. There is absolutely no costs to utilising Acts 435 whatsoever. And some churches and charities get around £10,000 a year through utilising Acts 435 for those specific requests, which is often money that they couldn't, fundraise for themselves, or it would take them a lot of time and energy to put into fundraising for. Actually, we can help them to meet those needs super quickly, which is great.
700 is amazing. I didn't have any number in my head, but that does sound like quite a lot.
Yeah, it is absolutely, but we've still got pockets of the country. Well, we want to see everybody who is in need reached. So actually, we've got so many areas of the country we would love to cover, and so many pockets where we have no partners at all. So we frequently get calls on our office number, obviously, for people trying to find help, and obviously because we do the helping through the local partners, we direct them towards their most local partner. And for some people we can't do that, which always is, yeah, it just is really hard to say we don't have anyone local to you, unfortunately. So we would love to see more churches and charities partner with us.
700 is great. Let's get another nought on the end, basically.
Yes, you know what, yes, come on, God.
Right, thank you. I really do enjoy talking to people and finding out about new things I didn't know about. One of my joys is to share that with other people who may never have heard of you. I mean, obviously you're UK centered and working, which is important to think of. It's also important to remember that you're offering something that is helping people for free, which is fantastic. If people wanted to know more about you, obviously we want people who will have a need to go to their local church and say, I need some help, and to connect to you and to sign up with you, which is brilliant. But if people want to find out more about you directly, I'm guessing more perhaps donors, where do they go to?
Yeah, so our website is acts435.org.uk. And on that website, they'll see a button at the top that says Give to a Need. It also has on there the active number of requests that are currently live on the website. So you'll see how many people are waiting for help, and you can click on that button as well. And then you'll see the list of requests on there.
Cool. Yes, go and check out the website if you want to know more. Thank you so much, Katie, for this. I stumbled across you and thought, wow, what an amazing group of people. We connected a little bit, and I thought, wow, this is really awesome. So it's always my delight to just share that with other people, and hopefully people might connect into you having heard this or seen it on YouTube, podcast, whatever. So thank you for your time, the work you're doing, having been on the crisis end of help many years ago. It thrills me to think there are people who are connecting you with the next step in that. Again, not in absolute crisis right now. I've got a little bit of food for a few days, but you know what? I've got this need now, and where do I go? And it's just great that there is someone filling that gap in such a simple way. I'm sure some of the mechanics of getting money from point A to B is not necessarily that simple, websites and stuff. But yeah, I just think it's great. So thank you. And yeah, keep doing what you're doing. But go and check out the website, which was acts435.org.uk.
Absolutely. Yes, it was. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.